Coming to you live from Medellin Wellness Center here in Colombia. This is the Fredcast, and I am Fred Busch. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody around the world. Thank you very much for joining me here on the Fredcast. This is our second episode, and I'm very excited to be here. I got a great episode lined up for you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the news of the week. We're going to be discussing some of this, what's going on with the variants and the COVID and all of that. We're going to talk about a really interesting battle going on between two United States against each other that I find very interesting. And then we're going to go into, every week we're going to have to be discussing a really common myth of nutrition. So today we're going to be discussing the myth of protein and the myth that protein is a good thing in your diet. And as you know, all of our episodes, we're going to be discussing how to live with enlightenment and how to live with more awareness. And today we're going to be talking about the psychology of deprivation. All right, which is something that I think once you're aware of, you'll become more powerful in your ability to navigate your different disciplines in your life. And, as you maybe have heard from the first episode, all of our episodes, we are going to be reading a chapter from the Prophet, from Khalil Gibran. And this week, we're going to be reading the chapter on love. So I am very excited about that. And, as those of you who have heard me already read the Prophet and I start to cry immediately, you get to appreciate how deeply important that masterpiece is, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. All right, everybody. So again, thank you for being here, and let's just get right into it. This week, articles are coming out discussing these troubling variations and variants, as they're calling them, of the different coronavirus strains. And one of the things that's come out is the fact that the genesis behind these variants is in people that have a weak immune system. And so what's happening is people have weak immune systems, apparently, according to this articles, and in these people that have weak immune systems, these variants are being able to mutate, and as a result, more and more dangerous and more deadly strains, according to the modern medical way of seeing it, are all emerging, and the entire point of this podcast, the Fredcast, is about our immune system. I mean, I've created this project in order to discuss the elements of my new book, the Medellin Wellness Protocol, which is about what I call the 5 fundamental factors to strengthen your immune system. So everybody, whether it's for your own sake or for the sake of making sure that these things are not happening, we all have to work on strengthening our immune system. And that doesn't just come because you want it to come. Strengthening your immune system comes because you're doing things that are going to help your biology to function at a more optimal level. And that's what we're talking about here. So this is a plant-based podcast because that is one of the things that we all have to do in order to get our immune system to function at the highest level. I mean, we are eating in a way that is creating a very weak biological organism, and as a result, of our weakness, and as that expresses as in our immune system, then not only are the people suffering themselves, but then now we have this potential for more and more of these variants, which is just causing more and more disruption in our society, and we need less and less of that right now. So if we could all please eat more fruit I'm going to sound very repetitive or redundant here as I discuss this conversation of eating more fruit, but that is how it is. And I am not going to apologize for that, because the truth will, it stands on its own ground. And the more fruit that you eat, all things being equal, because I may or may not tell you to eat, stop eating this, stop eating that, but all things being equal, the more fruit you eat, the better your immune system is going to function. And so that's, the facts. All right. So, let's get out there, everybody, and let's, do these things and help ourselves and help everybody around us to be able to, find a way to get that fruit into our system, to get those smoothies, the people that you love, make them smoothies, make them juices, make them things that, that are going to help them and help their immune system. Okay. Because that's the key. All right. And that's what we have to do in order to, really start to improve ourselves. Okay. So, another thing that's happening right now is a battle between two states in the United States of America. I'm actually American, as you can imagine, but I'm presently not living in the United States. I'm living in Colombia. So as I'm reading it, the battle is between the state of Colorado and the state of Nebraska. And what happens, or what has happened, is that a couple of days ago, the state of Colorado declared a meat out day, a day free of meat. The governor, the actual governor of Colorado, declared that, I think it's going to be March 20th in a few days, is a day where, it's not, binding, but the idea is for the entire state to not eat meat that day. As a plant-based teacher and a plant-based, leader, I would maybe could call myself possibly, that to me is very exciting news. I just think that's the coolest thing ever, and a very enlightened governor right there. And so as a result of that, though, not everybody was happy. And in fact, the neighboring state, it's called Nebraska, and their entire economy is essentially based on, the cattle industry. Well, they were not very happy about that concept of a meat-free, day in Colorado. And so what they decided to do is they decided to have a meat on your menu day. In order to counter this meat-free day, they're going to have you have to have meat on your menu on your diet day kind of thing. And basically it was just a pretty, blatant attempt to, I don't know, take the public relations, push out of the Colorado initiative and try to get more attention to, away from that. But, look, number one, I understand, these people's livelihoods in Nebraska are tied to the cattle industry. And, anytime, somebody gets their livelihood threatened, whether it's a miner who's, mining coal, or a cattle rancher who's, and this is their life and this is their lifestyle. I mean, this is their livelihood, meaning this is how they make their living, this is how they feed their kids. Well, I absolutely understand why there's going to be a lot of resistance against that. But at the end of the day, we all as a society are going to need to evolve, and people that are growing cattle now are going to need to, shift their land use to produce something else on their land, other than cattle, which is essentially one of the most unsustainable things. So why, I had to look this up today because, this is not a number that I really wanted to know, but I did look it up. And I looked it up just now. I asked Google, I said, Google, how many animals are slaughtered every day for food? And I had to say, I had a number in my mind that I thought it was going to be like, 100 million, a couple 100 million animals a day slaughtered for food. But that was wishful thinking. In fact, the number is 3 billion. 3 billion animals are slaughtered every single day for what is considered food, even though it's really not actually food for a human being. It may be food for a tiger or for a wolf or something. But so 3 billion animals a day, and guys, maybe you're not interested in health, and that's fine. I don't, my main motivation personally is not health. My main motivation is spiritual truth and respect for life. But maybe your motivation is not health either. Maybe your motivation is the environment. In which case, we have to appreciate that if there's 3 billion animals being killed every single day, how many animals are being sustained every single day so that we can just kill them, so that we could eat them and kill ourselves in the process. This is really one of the most, this is where barbarism combines with ignorance, and this is almost too much for a fictional movie that we would engage in such a practice of sustaining all these animals, so that we can kill them, so that we can then make ourselves sick in the process of eating what we're not really designed to eat in the first place. And so that's kind of my whole point, is that, in order to sustain these animals, I'm not going to get into the killing part. That's a spiritual thing. And, I obviously am quite, concerned and stressed out about that. But let's just talk about the environment and the earth just for just a moment, okay? And why Colorado and their initiative is so important, because they recognize this. They recognize that, in order to keep all of these animals alive, we have to feed them plant-based foods. And all of these plant-based foods are where we're dedicating, millions and millions of hectares of very favorable agricultural land. We're dedicating it to food crops that people don't get to eat, because we have to feed the animals. And we feed the animals all of this food that we're growing. And if we would just feed people with that food, there would be no starvation, there would be no hunger, and there would also be a lot less destruction of the rainforest, which really we cannot afford anymore. It's 2021. We cannot afford what we're doing. So the way to do it is to stop the market, everybody. The way to do it is not just to talk, and I'm not saying I'm perfect as a perfect environmental steward. I certainly make mistakes, and when it comes to plastic consumption and, my gosh, all the things that do not help the environment that I participate in. But at the end of the day, I think that it is common knowledge that one of the most significant things that we could all do to save the planet and to help the future generations is to stop eating animals and to stop eating meat. And so an initiative like Colorado, which is saying to the whole state, hey, let's just start off with one day. Maybe that will grow into 2 days. Maybe that will grow into a week, at some point. But we start where we start, and people start to maybe see the benefits of that. And I just find that just to be fantastic on the behalf of Colorado. And of course, when it comes to the ranchers and the cattle producers and people that are invested in the animal industry, my heart goes out to anybody who's in a line of work that is not sustainable for the planet, and that is involved with all of this pain and suffering, and really is doing all of that and then making people sick. People are eating these animal products and we're getting sick. This is, as we're going to talk about in a minute, we're going to talk about protein, we're talking about cancer. And so this is why I'm saying, immune system, general health, it's all related to how do we eat. And of course, the other fundamental factors about, which I write about in my book, how do we eat? How do we exercise? How do we use our mind? How are we resting? And how are we living more or less organically? But this how do we eat part is so fundamental that it's not necessarily just 20% of, it's not just 1 on 5. It's more like, 70% of the whole thing, because how you eat, as we're going to talk about in a minute, becomes your chemistry. And, your chemistry, from a physiological perspective, is your reality. So that's how we connect the dots, and whether it's an environmental reason or a health reason or a spiritual reason, there's so many reasons to support the initiatives that which Colorado is taking, and maybe you can, get your own state to do it as well, because 3 billion animals dying every single day, it's a number that no animal dies in peace, right? No animal wants to die. This is what we say in the spiritual speak. All animals cherish their life, right? And so less is more on the killing, and 3 billion is, I think, a lot. I kind of want to almost cry when I hear that kind of a number. But in the meantime, getting discouraged isn't going to help. It doesn't help me. I don't operate with that, attitude of, oh, it's hopeless, because it's not. What it is the situation, and all we have to do is continue to, spread light, and hopefully this kind of a project and this Fredcast will begin to help and do that. I have videos on YouTube as well that discuss food, for 2 straight hours. You can look on my channel, Fred Busch Yoga, and you can find those in case you want a full lecture on all the reasons to eat plant-based food. All right, so that was some of the news of the week, and now I want to talk about the nutrition myth of this episode. As you know, every episode I'm going to tackle a common nutritional myth that's holding people back from experiencing health and well-being. Today, the myth is about protein. And, I almost could just speak about this myth every single week, because of the pervasiveness with which it is believed by the entire population of almost the entire world at this point. There's been a majorly successful campaign of misinformation and public relation type of misinformation regarding protein, and that was been done by the industries that are purveyors of protein. But they have been so successful that anybody, including myself, as I sit here and say, well, you know what, protein is not good for you. In fact, protein is the opposite of good for you, and I'll explain why. But even as I say it, I know that everybody out there is saying to themselves, oh my gosh, I thought Fred Busch knew what he was talking about. You're going to say, I thought, well, he's an author and he's written books, but now he's saying that protein's not good. So obviously then he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I understand that that's the first thing that's going on in your minds. And the reason is because of how successfully you have been suggested in misinformation about this subject by people who have a great interest in your misunderstanding of the subject. And so I'm going to clear it up. I'm going to make it hopefully abundantly clear, or at least start the process of clarifying why protein is not a good part of your dietary, and in fact, less is more when it comes to protein. So yeah, less is more when it comes to protein, and let's talk about it. Let's make sure you understand the science of this and the anatomy of this, because as I've already told you in the first episode, I do not want anybody taking my word for anything that I say. I'm not here to make you believe me. I'm here to present information as I studied it from my teachers and my masters on the subject, and you can take it or you could leave it, and that's your prerogative. And so please understand that I'm not trying to preach or be evangelical here. If it makes sense to you, it does, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But let's understand that protein, the conversation we can first talk about the conversation of acid and alkaline. You all have heard of that, I think, right? That you want to eat in a more alkaline way and you want to eat less in an acidic way. I think everyone knows that, or if you don't, then here's your introduction to this. And of course, we talk about acid and alkaline. We're talking about the pH scale running from 0 to 14. And 7 being neutral. And when you go under 7, you're in the world of the acidic chemistry, and you go over 7, you're in the world of the alkaline chemistry. And this has to do with electromagnetics and electrons and all of that. But at the end of the day, we classify acidic and alkaline depending on the chemistry. And it's well known that our human blood is alkaline. Our human blood is 7.0 something or 7.1 something. I don't have the exact number, but it is in the alkaline domain. And so as a result, it is important for us to eat things and eat foods that are more alkaline and not to eat foods that are more acidic. And the reason is that if we eat acidic foods or foods that produce an acidic effect on us, like milk, which may be alkaline if you test it in a laboratory, but then after it has been digested, it has an acidic ash. They call it an acidic byproduct. So when we eat something that has that acidic result, our blood starts to become more acidic. And as a result, this is actually the cause of osteoporosis, where our organism is not willing to allow the blood to become acidic, and so it steals or utilizes the alkaline minerals it has stored in the vessels, in the connective tissue, and in the bones, and it uses that to neutralize the chemistry of the acid influence of the milk or the meats or the fried foods that we're consuming. So look, protein, this is my point, protein is the acid side of chemistry, all right, period. Protein is the acid side of chemistry. Now, what does acids do? Well, acids irritate, acids inflame, and then acids aggravate, and then acids essentially damage the cell. And if you didn't know that already, maybe you have experience with a baby, and this is what my teacher, Dr. Morris, uses as an example all the time. And he explains that, you have a baby and the baby has a dirty diaper, and if you happen to be late on changing the baby's dirty diaper, what are you going to find underneath the diaper? You're going to find a rash, right? You're going to find an irritation. You're going to find a redness. And why is that? It was because the protein, the waste material, which is protein material, is aggravating the cells and aggravating the skin and aggravating the mucosa and creating all this irritation. Well, what's doing that? That is the waste products, and that is also the acid side of chemistry. So whether it's the protein that you eat or the acids that you are producing in your own body from the waste material of metabolism, all acids are going to behave the same way. And what the acids do is they irritate, inflame, and then begin to damage the cell. And why is that important? Because my teacher, Dr. Morse, is very clear, and he says that people use the C word and they talk about cancer, but in his understanding of it, cancer is the damaged cell that comes from any number of sources, but one source and one way that a cell can be damaged is from acids. And acids is protein. Okay? They're called amino acids. But look, the other thing to understand is that protein, when you use the word protein, it doesn't really mean very much. And in protein as a word itself is not a nutrient. See, this is where people have a major misunderstanding that protein is a nutrient, like it has to do with like vitamins and minerals and protein. No. This is a major misunderstanding. No, see, protein is the result of nutrition. Protein is the result of an organism that has taken its amino acids and constructed those amino acids into some sort of matrix or some sort of structure. But that structure that is protein, which has already been constructed by the animal, which is why the chicken looks like a chicken, and we look like we look, because we're all constructing our own protein from what? From the amino acid. And so really, the nutrient itself is called amino acids. And I think that just so you appreciate this, I'd like to emphasize this, all amino acids are produced in the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom produces the amino acids. The animal kingdom eats the plants and then gets the amino acids. And then people who believe that the best way to get amino acids is to eat an animal that ate the plant instead of eating the plant itself is, again, this is a misunderstanding of anatomy and misunderstanding of what kind of a species we are. We are not carnivores. We are not hunters by nature. We're not even omnivores. We can eat omnivorously, but that's really not how we thrive. And so all of this is just a result of a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation and suggestion that has been given to us by people who are interested in our continuing to perpetuate these markets for them and for their profits. But it's just a little bit too bad that they're so interested in their profit over the health of our society, because our entire society is sick because of eating dairy. Our entire society is sick because we continue to eat, these animal foods and these meats and these chickens and these fish. And it's not just our health, it's literally our earth. I mean, we are tearing our earth apart at the seams because of our bloodthirst. 3 billion animals a day getting killed. Imagine, as I said, how many are alive, just waiting, and we're sustaining, and so, and the oceans is even worse, and so I just want to, make my point that I think I've made it, that, when it comes to protein, and it comes to this idea that the more protein that you eat is the better, that could not be farther from the truth. Okay, I mean, and just to kind of emphasize this, and I'll kind of end with this, because these kinds of conversations could go on for quite a long time, and I'm happy to answer your questions if you'd like to bring them to my attention. But there is no time in a human being's life where they need more quote unquote protein, need more amino acids than when they're an infant, when they're a baby, in the first couple of years of life. That is the time of our organism when we would need the most protein. And so we could look at what mother's milk is made out of and the constituency of mother's milk, and we find that mother's milk is approximately 2% protein, which is a very small percentage relative to what's making up the rest of it, which is carbohydrate mostly and a little bit of fat, of course. But the protein part is very, very small. And so the idea that the more you eat protein, the better, is exactly the opposite. Okay, and for athletes, you need to understand this. If you have not watched the movie on Netflix called Game Changers, you need to watch it. Athletes, again, this idea that protein means muscles, it means strength, this could not be farther from the truth, and this could not be holding you guys and your performances back anymore. And the plant-based athletes are learning very quickly that you are what you eat, and that the better your biology is, and the better your physiology is, the better you're going to be at your sport or your athletics. Okay, so protein is not good. Protein is, in fact, the cause of cancer. It is acidic in its nature. It is destructive. It is, in fact, the cause of diabetes as well, for a totally different reason. But it is what it is. All right, so let's get off of that myth. Hopefully, that has been debunked. And you're ready to live a life eating more fruit and get your amino acids from the plant kingdom, and let your body make its own protein, because the idea that you have to eat protein that was already constructed by a chicken or by a fish or by a cow is just really not based in any sort of physiology, because at the end of the day, if you were to eat that animal, you would still have to break it down. That's called digestion. Of course, this was cooked meat, so the bonds, the chemical bonds, and the electromagnetic energy are all gone, and so you're basically just trying to digest or break down something that is really just a coagulated mess, and it's a waste of energy. And then you don't even get the viable amino acids anyway, because they've been cooked. So we want to get our amino acids. We want to get them from spirulina, get them from the blue-green algae, get them from the fruits and the vegetables and the nuts and the seeds, the raw almonds, things like that. And just less is more. Okay, everybody. We want to eat more fruit, and we want to eat less protein. And that's the rule of life for us as human beings, in order for us to have health. All right, so now moving into one of my favorite parts of this podcast, which is living with enlightenment, learning skills and applying the skills that we have already learned in order to make our lives better, basically. And that's got to be the whole point of everything that we're doing, whether it's yoga or eating better or resting more. Everything that we're doing, we have to be doing it to make our lives better, which means to be feeling better in every way of our life, and to experience more well-being, more energy, and a better outlook and a better experience of our life. And then so that's the point. All right. And so today we're going to talk about the psychology of deprivation. Now, this is a subject that I think can be applied to many different aspects of our lives, whether it's nutrition or whether it's any other type of pattern that we find ourselves in that we need to or that we feel is holding us back. And so, we could definitely talk about this in the context of diet and discipline of diet. And so we can do that for now and see how it applies to other things as well. But what is the psychology of deprivation and why is it important to know? Well, psychology of deprivation is the fact that when you tell yourself that you will never, ever do something again for the rest of your life, that your ego or this little aspect within you gets essentially terrified at the idea that it's never going to get to do what it thinks it wants to do again. So whether it's, eating cheese or whether it's smoking a cigarette or whether it's drinking alcohol or any number of addictions out there, when we tell ourselves that we will never do it again, that creates what I am calling and is called the psychology of deprivation, which is this frequency within us that we begin to feel like we're going to be deprived of this thing that we feel that we need or that we feel that we like or that we feel that we love. And now we feel like, well, we're never going to get that again. And that energy of this possible future lack that we're going to experience, this idea that we're going to be deprived, is so terrifying to our psychology that usually what happens is we immediately will go for what it is that we are going to feel deprived for. So, for example, if I tell you, hey, you're never going to eat a piece of chocolate again, ever, for the rest of your life. You will never eat chocolate again, never. Well, if you love chocolate and you are what might be called a chocoholic or somebody who really loves chocolate, and then I tell you that, and you take that into your heart, and you say to yourself, oh my God, I am never going to have chocolate again. Well, most of us would start thinking about chocolate right away, and most of us would go to the store, within a day and buy as much chocolate as we possibly can, and maybe even binge on chocolate, because the idea of never ever having chocolate again was so scary that we just couldn't handle that. And so, what do? What we have to do is we do not talk about the future in absolutes. There is no reason to. There's no reason to say that you're never going to do this or that again. I mean, I have not eaten, an animal product or animal food consciously or without it being hidden, in a recipe that I wasn't aware of, in over 20, almost 25 years now. And even if I may or may not ever eat something like that again, I'm never going to say it out loud, or I'm never going to say it to myself about the future. I have no reason to say that I am never going to eat meat again. I have no reason to say that I'm never going to eat cheese again. I mean, I may or may not. I just have no reason to say it, because by my putting it out there like that and my making it into something that is something that I can become afraid of, then all I'm doing is I'm setting myself up for fear and anxiety and for failure, because the frequencies of fear and anxiety, they do not lend themselves to success in the world of discipline. And so the solution is that we just never talk about the future. We could talk maybe about the next meal. If we're talking about this in a dietary context, we could say, the next meal, I'm not going to probably eat meat, but I don't have to tell you what I'm going to do next year or in 10 years or for the rest of my life, because the fact of the matter is that I may not even live until tomorrow. I may not even live until 50 years. So what does it matter if I say what I'm going to do when the future is not actually a reality. And what is a reality is now. And I can talk about what I'm doing now, but and by talking about what I'm doing now, I bring up no fear. I have no fear of deprivation because I have not made any commitments about what I'm going to do to anybody external for the rest of my life. There's a very important quote. It ends the movie The Usual Suspects, this quote. If you've ever seen that movie, The Usual Suspects, it's the very end of the movie. It's the very last line. But it's a very famous line. And it says, the greatest trick the devil ever played is making the world believe that he doesn't exist. And so what does that mean? It means that, by us creating this monster of the future, we then have to, relate to that fear, and that fear and that psychology of deprivation is literally insurmountable. Almost nobody can transcend it. The only way to transcend it is to never let it come out in the first place. And so, what that quote means is that, the devil, as long as you believe it does not exist, then you cannot target it and you cannot do anything against it. He will operate on you because you don't understand that he exists. He's made you believe that he doesn't exist. But once you do then know that he does exist, you see now, in other words, once you know that the psychology of deprivation does exist, now you can bring your awareness to it. Now you can transcend it, and now you can not allow it to arise in the first place. How do you not let it arise? It's easy. Never make a declaration out loud or even to yourself about what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Okay? And that's it. Because you can manage what you're doing today, and that's it. And then you can tomorrow manage what you're doing today as well, because every day is today. And what you're doing in 10 years is completely irrelevant. And usually what will happen is, as you begin to apply, some different kinds of patterns in your life, you're going to get some feedback. You're going to get some positive feedback, and it's going to begin to perpetuate itself. And you're not going to have to think about. I don't personally need to think about whether I'm going to eat meat in 20 years or not. I feel so good not eating meat. I just know, or I just don't need to discuss the future. And the more I feel good, and the more that what I'm doing, shows me how aligned I am to biology and nature, then the less I need to talk about the future, because my reality is based upon the present moment. Okay, it's not based upon any kind of future. All right, so now it's time for what's probably my favorite time of the Fredcast, which is the time that we get to share from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Thank you for bearing with me on that first episode, because of course the introduction was a bit longer, and it was just kind of setting up how this is going to be a conversation between a master and all of the people of the town, and the people of the town are going to ask him a question that is important to them, and he is going to answer that question. And each section or each chapter of the book really is about a different subject. And these are very short chapters, maybe 1 page or 2 pages at the most. And so from now on, we're going to be just covering one subject at a time, as opposed to some of the longer introductional material that came on the first episode. All right, so then let's continue. Then Al-Mitra said, "Speak to us of love." And he raised his head and looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, "When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep. And when his wings unfold you, yield to him, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when he speaks to you, believe in him, though his voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, he gathers you unto himself. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husks. He grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for God's sacred feast. All these things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world, where you shall laugh, but not all of your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears. Love gives not but itself, and takes not but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed. For love is sufficient unto love. And when you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love. For love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let these be your desires. To melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night. To know the pain of too much tenderness. To be wounded by your own understanding of love. And to bleed willfully and joyfully. To wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving. To rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy. To return home at evening time with gratitude. And then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. So that was the chapter on love by Khalil Gibran and the Prophet. Okay, everybody, so thank you for joining me here on this second episode of Fredcast. Anybody having any questions or anything that you'd like me to address, either in my nutritional myths or in our living enlightenment parts of the podcast, please send me an email to Fred Busch, FredBusch @miamiyoga.com, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining me. Have a really great morning, great evening, great afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And signing off for now until the next episode, and I can't wait to see you then.